Hi everyone, this is Adam, the creator and lead developer of Railroader. Today we're looking at timetables, which are a new feature in Railroader 2024.6.3. If you're watching this in the present day, that's on our experimental branch where we work on new things. If you're watching this in the future, maybe early 2025, it's probably been merged into the main branch of Railroader, so you don't need to make any special arrangements in Steam to be running this code. But for now, it's on the experimental branch. We're putting it out there to see what people think and see what needs to be improved on it before we release it fully publicly. When I think of timetables, I think of two audiences. There's the public audience, which is looking at the timetable to determine where passenger trains go and how they can get to where they need to be, maybe by transferring trains or something like that. The other purpose is for train orders, so for timetable and train order operation, for example. And so we've added timetables to Railroader for kind of a third reason, more of a gameplay reason, which is to make passenger operations a bit more interesting, a bit more challenging, and also rewarding. So if you elect to use timetables in Railroader, you can use them to run your passenger trains. And if you do that, the passengers will start gathering at stations so that they can be there at the time that the train is expected to arrive, as well as to get to the destinations that the train is actually going. Right now in Railroader, without timetables, the passengers just gather randomly, and so it's kind of a luck of the draw sort of situation there. So we wanted to make it a bit more interesting, and timetables are really a great realistic way to do that, but they do put some constraints on how you play the game, which previously could be a little bit loosey-goosey. So let's get into the details here. I wanted to start out by showing you a timetable, and this is a railroad that we play and test on. So I'm going to pop up the timetable here. Don't get too overwhelmed. This is a timetable for this railroad. Your timetable may be much simpler, but I just wanted to use it to talk about some of the ideas behind timetables, sort of the foundational elements. So on this particular timetable, we see two different branches, if you will. So there's kind of the main line here at the top, and then the Appalachia branch down lower. And that's just kind of an organizational way because the Appalachia branch is accessed through Appalachia Junction. And so we kind of split it off here to keep things a little, maybe a little more orderly. Each timetable train has a few aspects to it. It has a name or a symbol. In this case, those are numbers. So 19 west, 11 west, 10 east, and 18 east. And so maybe you inferred there's the name, there's also direction, westbound, eastbound. Each timetable train has one and only one direction. It also has a class, which is just an indicator of its sort of level of seniority on the railroad, let's say. One other thing is that westbound trains, you read that down. So we start in the east. On this railroad, it runs from Whittier to Nantahala. So Whittier's in the east. Westbound reads down. So it'll be in this particular train it'll be departing Whittier at 9 o'clock. And it'll also arrive in Nantahala at 10:05 a.m. And then conversely, on the eastbound, we have another train here, train 10, starts in Nantahala, departs 7:30, and arrives in Whittier at 8:35. So the passenger can look at this. The passenger can know, okay, well, if I want to go, if I'm in Nantahala and I want to go to Whittier, well, this is the time that I need to appear at the station. And so that's what happens when you use timetables in Railroader. You can have separate arrival and departure times. That's a little bit more for human reading purposes. The game doesn't use that as much. It really just uses the departure time at this point. Now that we have a little bit of a foundation on what timetables are and what the parts of them are, let's look at a different railroad. This is a similar sized railroad. It also runs from East Whittier all the way over to Nantahala, and then it also has the Appalachia branch, which branches off at Appalachia Junction. And note that Appalachia is railroad west from Appalachia Junction, even though on the map it kind of curves back around. Using Whittier as our point of reference, it is to the west of Whittier. So that's just something to keep in mind there. So let's look at how we would set up a timetable from scratch. An important part of timetables is that they are opt-in, so they're off by default. So to create a timetable, I need to go into the company window. I'm going to switch to the Settings tab, come down to Features, and then scroll down and find under Operations, Timetable. So when I check this, a new button will appear in the top right corner. You can click this button to bring up the timetable, or you can hit F2 to toggle it as well. That's the default key binding for it. And starting off, we have an empty timetable. So nothing's going on in our timetable here. So let's create one. We'll click Edit Timetable, and that opens up the timetable editor. So let's add a new train. We're going to add train 19, and 19 will be a westbound passenger train. And that's the default. Railroader sees that that's an odd number, so it defaults it to westbound. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. It's a first-class train, and it's a passenger train. And it starts out with no stops checked. So these are all the possible places that I could specify on the timetable. So on this particular train, I'm going to run from Whittier in the east to Appalachia Junction. Notice that some of these have S's next to them. Those are passenger stations. The ones without S's are just passing sidings. So let's check those. Whittier, Ella, Bryson, Hemingway, and Appalachia Junction. And so now I've added these stops to the train. You can see them, they now show up in the timetable, and all the times are 0, which is midnight. So let's look at these entries that were created when I checked them. For each timetable location, there is an arrival time, a departure time, and a meets field. The arrival time, like I mentioned before, is kind of optional. You don't really need to use it. The departure time is really the important part, and that's when that train is going to be departing that location and not before. And then the meets field is really just for humans, but if I wanted to say that this train is going to be meeting train 12 or something like that, I could put that in and it kind of shows up next to it. But again, right now that's just something for humans to look at. So let's set up the times on this train, and let's look at the departure time. We have two options for how the time is specified. We can say that it's an absolute time using the @ symbol here, or we can say it's a relative time using the plus sign. Usually for the first stop of a timetable train, I want to make that an absolute time. So I'm going to say this happens at a certain clock time of the day. Now in this game, it's 16:52. So I'm going to set the departure time for this train to 17:30 to allow a little bit of time for the passengers to start to gather. So now we have to decide how long is it going to take us to get to those next stations, and at what time can we depart from them at. And notice that in between each of these check stations, Railroader has included kind of an indicator of how long you should expect it to take to move between those 2 points. So from Whittier to Ella is estimated 5 to 6 minutes. It's giving us a warning here because right now we're allowing 0 minutes, which Railroader thinks is maybe questionable. So usually what we want to do is we want to account for the time to travel, but we also want to account for the station stop. And in this game, the minimum station stop is set to 1 minute. So I'm going to add 1 minute. So we'll say 6 minutes to reach Ella. And notice that the time updates here as well as in the timetable. And all the subsequent stations update as well. So I'll set this one. We'll say, we could say it'll take, we'll depart Bryson at 8 minutes after we depart Ella. That could work. And then Hemingway, we think it'll be about, let's say 9 minutes, and then 4 minutes after Hemingway will be finished at Appalachia Junction. So now we've built out the main parts of our timetable. We have this train 19 here. There's an important thing here. Notice that there's still nothing in the timetable over here. That's because I have not yet applied the changes that I've been making here in the timetable editor. So I could do that right now. Click Apply Timetable. And so now those changes have been published and they're visible to other players in the game. And they're also visible to the passengers who are now starting to form, to gather at the stations according to that. One quick thing is if you had not been using timetables previously and you just started using them, you are going to have some, let's call them residual passengers hanging out at this station. So here's 3 passengers to Almond. Almond is not on our timetable. And over time, those passengers are going to check the timetable and realize I'm in the wrong place, and they'll leave. Or maybe they'll decide to go to one of our other exciting destinations. So let's jump back to our timetable. One of the great things about the relative time is that it makes it very easy to adjust a particular station stop. So let's say for Bryson, I decided, my train probably needs to take water there. So what I might want to do is I could just bump this time up, say, well, I think 13 minutes. But it might better express what I'm hoping to do if I set an arrival time. So I'll say my arrival is 8 minutes after Ella. That's kind of generous. I'm sure we could do 7. And then my departure, I'm just going to allow 5 minutes to maybe get water. And so now we have an arrival and departure time. And the crew has, maybe a little slack if something goes wrong and they need to make up time when they reach Bryson. So let's apply that timetable. And again, it shows up over here. So let's go ahead real quickly and add another train. We'll add train 18. 18 east is even. So there it goes. And remember, it doesn't show up here until we add stops. So this train is going to be going east from Appalachia Junction. So let's check all of those. I'll check them just from the bottom. You could check Governor's Island if you wanted to, and that would be maybe more expressive of the time that you intend to reach Governor's Island. But for this purpose, we don't need that. And notice that when I do check that, other trains that don't stop there don't have a listed time. So let's uncheck that. Now for this train, what you might want to do starting out, maybe you only have one passenger train. You could just say, well, train 19 is going to reach Appalachia Junction. There's a Y at Appalachia Junction, so they're going to turn the train and then they're going to head back east. So let's pick a start time that is maybe just give them a little bit of time to do that turn. So 18:15 would be good, and then we can kind of run through here. Let's do our so let's look at what we've done. We've set up a timetable with 2 trains on it. If we wanted to just run with other players, like in multiplayer, or maybe just ourselves, and we want to stick to this timetable, we'd be all set. We don't need to do anything else. However, if we're running with auto engineers, we need a way to tell the auto engineer what timetable schedule we want them to follow. And if we do that, then the auto engineer, when it's running in passenger mode with coaches behind it, will automatically wait at those station stops. It doesn't do this for passing sidings, only passenger stops. It will wait until the departure time before it moves on from that station. So what we need to do is associate the engine, really, because the engine is where the auto engineer is configured. We need to associate the engine with this timetable, and specifically like which train it's going to be. So this one is going to be train 19. The way that we do this is using train crews. So let's go back into our company window. So let's say this is our mainline passenger. So we've created a crew to represent this train, and notice that now there's a train symbol drop down here. And so I could say, well, mainline passenger, they're going to be running on the 19 West timetable schedule. So I can select that. All right. Now there's one more step, which is to associate the engine with that train crew. So I've opened the inspector for this engine. I'm going to switch to the operations tab, train crew, and I select mainline passenger train 19 West. Okay. And now that I do that, if I hover over it, you see that the tooltip reads train 19, so that helps us. We also have another helper here. I can open the inspector on one of the coaches, switch to the passenger tab, and now because that engine has a train crew association that is associated with a timetable train, now I can say copy from timetable, and it will automatically select those timetable stops, and then I'll do copy to coupled so that all of the coaches are configured. And now my train is pretty much ready to go. So if I select the engine and put it into road mode, forward, full speed, now you can see it's saying its status is station stop Whittier Depot. That's really nothing new. The auto engineer would already do that because it knows that these passenger cars are set to stop at Whittier. So it'll pull up the station, And once it completes its stop, its minimum stop, it will then see, it's going to stay stopped because the timetable says don't depart before 17:30. We've still got about 27 minutes to go. So let's advance time so that we don't have to wait quite so long. So I'll open up, I'm going to click on the clock. This is a new feature. There's a time window now. And I can click to wait 15 minutes. So that'll get me a little bit closer to 17:30. And notice there's a message here, auto engineer on FR 200, train 19 west, holding at Whittier Depot until 17:30. So let's wait a few more minutes and we'll check the passenger cars. They're loading. That looks good. Let's just see what's happening at the depot. No passengers waiting, so everybody is on board, ready for that 17:30 departure. If any new passengers come, we'll continue accumulating those. So I just waited 5 more minutes there. Passengers start gathering about an hour before the departure time. And then after the departure time, new passengers will stop arriving. And then the passengers that are there will slowly disperse over the following 2 hours. So if your train was particularly late, there may not be many more people waiting around anymore. So we're almost at our departure time. Let's see what happens. And notice the status, depart Whittier, 17:30. Okay, so the auto engineer says departing Whittier Depot on time, and the time there's in the console. All right, so now our train will make its way, and if I pop up the car tags, I can see 19 West. So as the train runs off into the distance, let's look at one more thing. Let's open up our timetable editor again. And I want to talk quickly about branch lines because remember earlier I mentioned that trains have one and only one direction. So I could alter this train. I could say, well, this train is going to go to Cochrane and Appalachia on the Appalachia branch. And notice we get a new section here that shows up. And that would work fine because this is a westbound train. And remember I said that Appalachia is west of Whittier, Bryson, etc. But let's say I had not done that. Let's say that we wanted this train to continue on to Almond and Nantahala. Notice that now Cochrane and Appalachia are dimmed out. That's because our train can't change direction and reach those because you'd have to go west and then back east again. So the way to do this properly would be to add a new train, 55, which goes from, maybe it goes from Bryson direct to Appalachia, let's say. That would be one way to solve it, and then we would add another one, an eastbound, back the other way, for example. And looking back here at our train 19, there's a little bit of a bug that I just noticed. If I uncheck Nantahala and Almond, and I do check Cochrane and Appalachia, it still is allowing me to select these locations that are that would require a direction change to reach. And so it really shouldn't be letting me do that. Those should be dimmed out as well. So that's an item for my bug list and for a future release to fix. So our train is now arriving at Ella. That's great. How are we doing on time? It's 17:34 and we're scheduled to depart Ella at 17:36. So I think that by the time the train gets stopped, we should be able to depart Ella right on schedule. I did want to add that if all of this seems a little bit overwhelming and you want to maybe get started with something a little bit simpler, there is an option in here for a starter timetable. So open up the timetable editor, gear menu, load predefined starter. And that will replace the trains that I have defined with a kind of predefined timetable. And it's a totally different time, but it's already set up with offsets with these relative times which you could use, and then you could just manipulate the departure time to find something that meets whatever you want to do. And note that for the starter timetable, it's defined for the entire line, even though we don't have the entire line unlocked. And that's okay. By the timetable editor, it's still going to show those, and I can still change these numbers around, and the timetable computes out properly what it needs to. So that's one option for getting started. So you don't have to type in your own offsets. You could put this in and see if that works for you and tweak it and adjust it from there. And there we are, making our on-time departure from Ella. That's about it for this update. By the way, in the background there is one of our new buildings for Ella Farm Supply. We've been adding some new ones. We'll have more to come. So that's our video on timetables. Hope you liked it. Thank you for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments on the Discord server, links in the description, as well as the Steam community site. And thank you for your support of Railroader. It means so much to us. We're delighted to see people playing it and hear what they think about it. So again, thanks so much for watching. Until next time.